Welcome back to another story on Whispered Tales. Now, let's dive into today's story.
One mission, no return. The golden light of dusk spilled over the rooftops of Colorado Springs. The streets still smelled faintly of rain, the air crisp with autumn's chill. Inside a modest suburban garage, Ethan Lewis bent over the frame of an old motorcycle, his hands blackened with grease, his mind at peace in a way he once thought impossible. Once, Ethan had been a Delta Force operator, a ghost on battlefields the world pretended didn't exist. He had marched through the jagged mountains of Afghanistan, felt bullets tear the air beside his ear, and watched comrades fall in the blink of an eye. But those days were 2 years gone. He had folded his uniform, sealed away the medals and memories, and tried to build something new. Now, his world was smaller but infinitely more precious. A wife who healed people instead of wounding them, and a 12-year-old son whose laughter could chase away the darkest ghosts. The garage door creaked open, and Alex bounded in, backpack slung over one shoulder, his grin brighter than the fading sun. "Dad, look at this," he exclaimed, waving a paper covered in neat diagrams and bold red letters at the top. A+. Ethan wiped his hands on a rag, taking the sheet as if it were a medal of honor. He smiled, not the hardened grin of a soldier on the evening news, but the tender pride of a father who had found something worth living for. "You did great, son," he said warmly. "Your mom's going to be proud." "Where is she, by the way?" Alex shrugged, dropping his backpack to the floor. "Still at the hospital. Emergency surgery. She said she'll be late." Nora, the woman who had stood by Ethan through scars seen and unseen. A trauma doctor with a steady hand and a heart that refused to break. She was the anchor to the new life Ethan had fought so hard to build. Ethan nodded and glanced out the window. Neighbors washed their cars, children played in the fading light, and somewhere down the block, a dog barked at the wind. It was the portrait of peace, the very thing he had once fought to protect. For the first time in years, he believed he might finally be just a man, just a father. But fate is rarely so merciful. The phone rang inside the house, sharp, insistent, jarring. Ethan almost ignored it, another telemarketer maybe, but something in the rhythm made his stomach tighten. "Go wash up for dinner, kiddo," he told Alex, masking the unease in his voice. "I'll be right there." He stepped into the kitchen, picked up the receiver. Lewis residence. The voice on the other end froze him in place. Gravelly, familiar, carved into his bones. "Ethan, it's me. David." For a moment, Ethan couldn't breathe. David Brennan, his former commander, his brother-in-arms, the man who had dragged him out of hell more than once. They hadn't spoken in months. David never called unless it was life or death. "David," Ethan whispered, dread gnawing at his chest. "Sit down," David rasped. "This is bad." The tone said it all. Ethan remembered firefights where David's voice had been steady as a rock. Tonight, it cracked under the weight of something even war had never broken. "My son, Michael," David began, voice faltering. "He's been taken." Ethan's knees nearly gave out. Michael, the boy who had once ridden on his shoulders, who called him Uncle Ethan, who sketched childish superheroes in his honor. "No, he's just a kid," Ethan stammered. "Who would?" "A crew." David cut in, his words jagged with rage. "Ex-Marines, dishonorably discharged, guilty of war crimes no one ever punished. They ambushed him 3 days ago. They tortured him." His voice cracked, breaking completely. "They cut off his fingers, sent them to me. And then, they dumped him like trash in a ditch." The phone slipped from Ethan's hand and clattered against the tile. His chest constricted, breath shattering into pieces. Michael, bright, kind, full of promise, gone in the most brutal way imaginable. He forced the phone back to his ear. "David, Jesus, I'm so sorry." "Don't say sorry," David snapped, his grief hardening into steel. "Say yes." Ethan frowned. "Yes to what?" "I have orders." David's words came out like broken glass. 9 men, all ex-special forces. They want them gone. No trial, no prison, wiped off the map. And they want it done in 24 hours. Ethan's blood ran cold. This wasn't a sanctioned mission on foreign soil. This was murder, here, on American ground. "David, listen to yourself," Ethan urged. "If you do this, you'll burn your career, your freedom. You'll lose everything." David's voice rose, cracking with pain. I've already lost everything. They killed my boy Ethan, my only son. He was 16. He was innocent. And now he's gone. Tell me you'll stand with me. After all I've done for you. Tell me you won't let me bury him alone. Ethan closed his eyes, memories flooding back. David pulling him from a wrecked Humvee, shielding him in a firefight, recommending him for the Medal of Honor. Debts of blood that could never be repaid. And Michael's smile, the boy who had once been the light of their world. Send me the files, Ethan said finally, his voice low but resolute. But we do this my way, not in blind rage. Not if it means losing everything. We do it smart, or not at all. There was silence, then a ragged breath. Fort Carson, 2 hours. Don't be late. Ethan hung up, his hand trembling no more. Upstairs, Alex was humming while packing a small bag, blissfully unaware of the storm about to engulf them all. Ethan watched him for a moment, heart aching. If it were Alex, he thought grimly, I would burn the world too. The father was gone. The mechanic was gone. What remained was the soldier. The night air bit cold as Ethan guided his truck through the winding roads toward Fort Carson. Each mile felt like a step deeper into shadows he had sworn never to return to. Back home, Alex would be safe with Richard Irwin, an old teammate Ethan trusted with his life. Nora would sense the truth in his eyes, though he had told her it was just another consulting job. A lie to protect her from the darkness. But Ethan knew there was no protecting anyone anymore. Not when the enemy was willing to butcher children. Fort Carson loomed out of the night, its fences and watchtowers familiar as old scars. The guards waved him through without hesitation, recognizing a legend even stripped of his uniform. Ethan parked outside a nondescript building, its windows glowing dimly. Inside, David waited. His once commanding presence now carried the weight of grief and fury. The table before him was littered with dossiers. 9 faces, 9 targets. 9 monsters who had once worn the same flag on their shoulders. They'll all be at a private airstrip near Salt Lake tomorrow, David explained, his voice hollow. Heading to Syria for mercenary work. This is our window. Less than 24 hours. Ethan flipped through the files, each page a record of corruption. Exemplary service followed by brutality, dishonor, expulsion. Men who should have faced court-martial years ago. Men who thought their discharge papers made them untouchable. He looked up at David. If we do this, there's no coming back. Not for you. Not for me. David's eyes burned. They murdered Michael. They laughed while they did it. I don't care if I burn, Ethan. I'll drag them into the fire with me. Ethan studied his old commander, saw the man who had once saved his life, the man who had raised a boy with hope and pride. That man was gone, replaced by a father hollowed out by loss. And yet, Ethan couldn't walk away. Because in David's grief, he saw his own nightmare. Alex lying in a ditch, mutilated, forgotten. If that day ever came, Ethan knew he would want a brother beside him too. He closed the file, jaw set. Then we do it. But we do it smart. No recklessness. No suicide mission. We plan this like soldiers. And when it's done, we walk away. David nodded slowly, tears glistening in eyes that had seen too much. Tomorrow night, he said. We end it. Ethan stepped out into the cold night, the stars sharp above the mountains. Once, he had dreamed of leaving the battlefield behind. Tonight, he knew the battlefield would never leave him. The surgeon. I don't ask why, Alan said simply. I only ask when. Finally, Oliver Lester slipped in, laptop under his arm, headphones around his neck. Once a quiet genius with comms and electronic warfare, now a civilian engineer. But as he tapped keys, cutting through digital defenses with ease, Ethan knew the soldier in him had never left. "You want silence," Oliver said without looking up. "I'll make their world go dark." Together, they formed a circle around David. The former commander looked at them, his family forged in fire. His voice broke, but did not falter. "Thank you for coming. I can't promise survival. I can only promise the truth. They murdered my son, and I won't stop until every last one of them pays." Richard placed a hand on David's shoulder. "Michael was ours too. You're not alone." The room fell silent. No one had to say the rest. They all knew stepping into this meant stepping outside the law, outside the light. But bonds of blood and brotherhood ran deeper than rules. Ethan rose, his voice cutting through the silence. "We're not soldiers anymore. No backup, no support. Just us. So every move has to count. We're not doing this for vengeance alone. We're doing this for Michael. For justice." He spread the map across the table, a private airfield in Utah, isolated, perfect for a slaughter. "Tomorrow, all 9 targets meet here. They think they're safe. We'll prove them wrong." The brothers leaned in. The mission had begun. The plan should have been simple. 9 men, 1 location, 1 night to erase them all. But as the team laid out their gear and checked weapons in the dim glow of the bunker, Ethan couldn't shake the itch crawling beneath his skin. "Something's off," Richard muttered, eyes narrowing over the map. 9 men scattered across 3 states, and suddenly they all show up in Utah? Too neat. Too convenient. Alan grunted agreement. "Smells like bait. Somebody wants them gone, and us to do the dirty work." Oliver tapped rapidly on his keyboard, scrolling through encrypted chatter. "I picked up transmissions linked to Obsidian Solutions. Private military contractors, officially legit. Unofficially, they've got blood on their hands from Kabul to Kandahar. And guess who testified against them in Congress 6 months ago?" Every eye turned to David. He didn't flinch. "I named names. I told the truth. And then my son was kidnapped and butchered." Ethan's gut twisted. Michael hadn't been killed out of random malice. He had been a message, a warning shot from a shadow empire. "Stay silent, or your family dies." "We're not just fighting 9 men," Ethan said quietly. "We're stepping into a war with people who pull strings in Washington. If we walk into Utah blind, we're not hunters, we're bait." David slammed a fist on the table, voice raw. "I don't care. They killed my boy. Truth, lies, conspiracies, it doesn't matter. I want them dead." Ethan caught his gaze, steady and unyielding. "And I want the truth. Because if we don't find out who ordered this, Michael's death will just be another cover-up. Do you want revenge or justice?" David's hands trembled around his pistol. For a moment, Ethan thought he might pull the trigger on thin air. Then, slowly, he lowered it. The choice wasn't made, not yet. But the crack in his fury was there. Dawn stretched gold across the desert as the team crawled into overwatch positions above the airfield. The facility was breathing, and the sky above thundered with the approach of helicopters, reinforcements. Ethan's chest heaved. They had survived, barely. But the line between justice and vengeance had been shattered, and David was on the wrong side of it. And Ethan knew. This was only the beginning. Smoke from the Utah firefight still clung to Ethan's clothes as the team's battered truck rattled through the desert night. Inside, silence pressed heavy. The lone survivor, a young ex-Marine bound and gagged, glared at them with feral defiance. Ethan didn't watch the prisoner. He watched David. His old commander sat hunched in the corner, hands trembling around his rifle, eyes burning with a feverish light. This wasn't grief anymore. It was something darker, an obsession sharpening into madness. When they stopped in a ravine to regroup, Ethan knelt before the prisoner. Who gave the order to kill Michael Brennan? The man spat blood, smiling through split lips. You think you're hunters? You're pawns. Michael was bait. Brennan was the target. Obsidian doesn't care about kids. They care about silence. David lunged, pressing his pistol to the man's head. Name them. The prisoner smirked. Names don't matter. You'll never touch them. Ethan grabbed David's wrist. We need him alive. But the shot rang out before the words left his mouth. The man crumpled, lifeless. The canyon echoed with silence. Richard cursed under his breath. Alan stared at David with disbelief. Oliver yanked his headset off in frustration. Ethan's voice shook with rage. He was our only lead. David turned, face twisted, eyes bloodshot. I don't need leads. I need blood. Only blood. In that moment, Ethan understood they hadn't just lost a clue. They were losing David. The man who once embodied honor had been consumed by vengeance. That night, by the campfire's flicker, Richard spoke the truth none wanted to face. He's going to get us all killed. We either follow him into madness, or we stop him. Ethan stared into the flames, hearing Alex's innocent voice in his mind. I'll take care of Mom while you're gone. Would he become like David if Alex were taken from him? Finally, he whispered, I won't abandon him. But if I have to, I'll be the one to stop him. The fire cracked, throwing sparks into the dark. The price of brotherhood had never been higher. By dawn, Oliver had decrypted fragments of Obsidian's communications. The truth was worse than Ethan imagined. It wasn't random, Oliver explained, sliding his laptop around so they all could see. Obsidian has been preparing a $2 billion defense contract. But David's congressional testimony threatened to expose their crimes. Michael wasn't killed for who he was. He was killed for who his father was. Richard's jaw clenched. So the kid died because David spoke the truth. Alan slammed a fist on the table. They murdered a child to protect a contract. Ethan felt his stomach twist. The picture was clear now. Michael's mutilation wasn't vengeance. It was strategy, a calculated execution to send a message. Oliver brought up a photo of a woman, sharp features, predatory eyes. Adriana Evans, former CIA deputy director, now head of Obsidian Special Projects. She greenlit operations in Afghanistan that David exposed. She ordered Michael's death to bait him into a trap. Ethan studied the face on the screen. He had seen her type before. Intelligence veterans who traded flags for profits, wielding shadows like weapons. David's hands shook around his gun. I don't care about her titles. She killed my son. I'll put her in the ground myself. Ethan stepped forward, voice firm. Listen to me. If you kill her outright, they'll call you a terrorist. But if we expose her, the world will know who murdered Michael. Do you want revenge, or do you want justice? For the first time, doubt flickered in David's eyes. But grief still chained him to rage. Maybe both, he whispered. Ethan exhaled. He knew the path ahead. This wasn't about 9 mercenaries anymore. It was about ripping the mask off a monster hiding behind polished glass offices in D.C. And it would take everything they had left. Miami shimmered under the neon glow as the team tracked Craig Padilla, Obsidian's fixer and the man who had commanded the Utah Purge. He was their only chance to connect Michael's death directly to Evans. They moved like ghosts through Meridian Capital's skyscraper, Oliver jamming cameras, Alan rigging escape charges, Richard covering from across the street. Ethan and David stormed the 42nd floor. Padilla sat bound and bleeding within minutes, his arrogance stripped bare. Under pressure, he cracked. It was Evans. She ordered it all. Michael's death. Utah. Everything. Brennan had to be silenced before the hearings. And now she wants me gone too. The confession was recorded, every word locked into Oliver's system. Proof at last. But before they could extract him, Obsidian's kill team hit the building like a thunderclap. Gunfire ripped through glass and steel. The skyscraper shook with explosions. Ethan fought with calm precision, Richard's sniper fire cutting through the chaos, Alan's charges opening escape routes. David dragged Padilla, firing wildly, a man torn between vengeance and necessity. On the rooftop, with helicopters closing in, Ethan confronted David. Padilla lay bleeding, barely alive. If he dies, the truth dies with him. Ethan shouted over the roar of rotors. You have to decide. Kill him and bury Michael in silence, or keep him alive and show the world who really did this. David's hands trembled on his pistol. His eyes were wild, tears streaking his face. He looked at Ethan, at Padilla, at the abyss yawning beneath them all. Finally, with a strangled cry, he lowered the weapon. Michael deserves the truth. They lifted off into the night, Miami burning below. For the first time, Ethan saw a glimmer of the man David used to be, not a father blinded by rage, but a soldier who understood sacrifice. It wasn't victory, not yet, but it was hope. 6 months later, autumn sunlight bathed Washington, D.C. in gold. Leaves drifted lazily down the avenues, carpeting the sidewalks in shades of fire and rust. Amid the calm, Ethan Lewis walked the stone path of Arlington National Cemetery, a bouquet of white roses in his hands. He stopped at the grave of Colonel David Brennan. The marble headstone was simple, etched with his name, rank, and years of service. Around it lay tokens left by others, small flags, handwritten notes, photographs of a boy whose smile would never fade from memory. Ethan laid the roses down gently, his fingers lingering on the cold stone. You didn't die for nothing, brother, he whispered. The truth came out. Michael can rest now. The fall of Obsidian Solutions had been swift and brutal. Adriana Evans, once untouchable, was paraded before Congress, her empire of shadows laid bare. Oliver's recordings, Padilla's testimony, the evidence gathered in Miami, all of it carved through the lies. Headlines blazed across the nation. Defense giant Obsidian exposed. Billions in contracts tied to war crimes. Senators resigned in disgrace. Generals were court-martialed. Evans herself was sentenced to life, her empire crumbling into dust. For once, justice had not been buried. But for Ethan, victory carried no joy. He remembered Utah, the way David executed a prisoner, the madness in his eyes. He remembered Miami, the moment David lowered his gun, choosing truth over revenge. And he remembered that final flight, when his commander sat broken, tears streaming, as if the fight itself had hollowed him out. David's heart failed just weeks after Evans' conviction. Doctors called it cardiac arrest. Ethan knew better. David had carried too much pain, and when the mission ended, so did he. The world would remember him as a decorated soldier. Ethan would remember him as more, a man who stumbled, broke, but in the end, chose the right thing. Dad? A young voice pulled Ethan back. He turned to see Alex, taller now at 13, standing beside Nora. The boy's eyes fixed on the headstone. Was he your friend? Ethan nodded. My brother. He taught me never to leave anyone behind, even when it cost him everything. Alex frowned thoughtfully. So he was a hero? Ethan's throat tightened. Yes, but not the kind in stories. He was a hero because he did the right thing, even when it was the hardest thing to do. The boy nodded solemnly, as if the weight of those words etched itself into him. Doing the right thing is hard, but if nobody does it, then nothing ever changes, right? Tears stung Ethan's eyes. He pulled Alex close, holding him tight. Exactly, son. That's exactly right. They left the cemetery together, stepping back into the sunlight. Ethan's heart felt lighter than it had in years. The war wasn't over. Shadows would always return, new monsters would rise, but the truth had lived, carried forward by those willing to pay the price. As the breeze rustled the leaves, Ethan swore he could hear Michael's laughter echoing faintly, and David's steady voice barking commands, as if from far away. Ghosts, yes, but also reminders. He squeezed Nora's hand, Alex's shoulder. For the first time in a long while, he smiled. Justice had been served. And memory would endure.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. See you again.